the United Nations lay the groundwork for cooperation over the next 2 years.
Urgent action needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, CARICOM Secretary General says.
And there is no risk of the Ebola virus outbreak in the Caribbean, new CARICOM Director says. Welcome to this week's edition of the CARICOM News Time, in which we feature the important discussions that took place during the CARICOM United Nations System meeting held recently in Georgetown, Guyana. I am Tusankin English Francis.
And I am Michelle Nurse. Thanks for joining us.
The Caribbean community and the United Nations system have laid the groundwork for their collaboration and cooperation over the next 2 years. They met on July 23rd and 24th at the CARICOM Secretariat's headquarters in Georgetown, Guyana, to discuss ongoing work in several areas pertaining to economic and sustainable development, as well as human and social development.
The United Nations and CARICOM have both emphasized the need for urgent and continued action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, mindful of the threat climate change poses to small island developing states. CARICOM Secretary General Ambassador Erwin LaRocque and UN Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs, Mr. Miroslav Zhenka, made this call on Tuesday, the 23rd of July, as they addressed the opening of the biennial meeting between CARICOM and the United Nations.
As the severity of Hurricanes Irma and Maria demonstrated, there is need for continued advocacy for urgent and enhanced climate action to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. Since global warming poses an existential threat to our community.
We are now only a few weeks ahead of the Climate Action Summit. Caribbean countries are leading the way in climate action, adaptation and mitigation, and the international community should support these efforts by providing the necessary public and private resources. To that end, the Secretary General has called on world leaders to come to the summit in New York with concrete, realistic plans to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 45% over the next decade and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
UN Political Affairs Chief Miroslav Zhenka lauded the multifaceted cooperation between the United Nations and the Caribbean community. He highlighted cooperation in adopting and implementing a counter-terrorism strategy as but one of many examples of how collaboration has become more operational and successful between the two parties. He drew attention to the impressive attendance at the meeting by his UN colleagues as an illustration of how CARICOM UN cooperation and the enthusiasm for it is growing exponentially.
Seeing so many UN colleagues attending this meeting today clearly illustrates the importance that CARICOM has as a strong partner for us. CARICOM's and the region's importance for the UN has also been underscored by the United Nations Secretary General's attendance of the 40th meeting of the Conference of CARICOM Heads of Government in St. Lucia earlier this month.
The CARICOM Secretary General said with the strong support of the United Nations Secretary General and in the face of increasing challenges, CARICOM member states remain firm in their resolve for sustainable development.
With much appreciation for the strong support of the Secretary General, and in the face of these increasing challenges, our member states remain firm in the resolve for the sustainable development of the Caribbean region. We are agents of that resolve as we seek to build on the strong foundation of partnership established between CARICOM and the UN system to effect improved development results. It is a partnership that the member states of CARICOM rely on, one that has become more effective in our coordination and implementation, one that will continue to evolve in response to changing needs and priorities, and one that on its 10th anniversary we can be proud of. As small states, there's an energetic push for the realization of the regional integration movement and its objectives. This is in support of a stronger and more resilient community and in response to the weakening of multilateralism in the conduct of international relations and an international system that is increasingly changing and challenging the sovereignty of small states.
The World Health Organization recently declared that the Ebola virus outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is a public health emergency of international concern. However, the risk of an Ebola virus outbreak in a region such as ours is very low, according to the new Executive Director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARFA, Dr. Joy St. John. Speaking with the CARICOM Secretariat's Communications Unit following the CARICOM UN meeting, Dr. St. John said that the threat that Ebola poses to the Central African region is cause for an assessment of our own health systems here in the Caribbean.
But if you read that statement, they are speaking about the risk being very low for the regions such as ours. It's an issue for nearby countries or the actual country in question. But the reason why CARFA issued a statement about Ebola is to put it in the context of how low the risk is. So to use the opportunity to assess and evaluate systems, not just within the Ministry of Health, but systems with other partners, for example, Port Health. Cannot have a porous border, and so I am thinking of more a situation where I'm telling people, yes, WHO issued a statement saying that the Ebola outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern, but no, it is not a situation where there will be an imminent case of Ebola coming to the Caribbean. So it's just a matter of assessing systems to ensure that we have the right support to give to the member states, the Caribbean member states.
She said that CARFA is coordinating discussions among key partners to ensure a holistic approach to the Ebola threat.
One of our other partners, a very key partner in this whole issue, is going to be the tourism industry. So we have also been communicating with the tourism industry, because one thing we do not want is that countries put measures in place that are not necessary. And this whole issue of stopping persons from traveling, stopping persons from coming into the Caribbean countries, that is not necessary. And this is why we are working with the countries, working with the tourism industry, so there are no inappropriate measures put in place, not just persons, but also cargo. We are not at that stage. So we will be working to ensure that there is just the view of the systems and no inappropriate cessation of travel or movement of goods.
With regard to her vision for CARFA, just 3 weeks into her post as Executive Director, Dr. St. John had this to say.
The vision for CARFA is first to consolidate CARFA, because it's a very young organization, only 6 years old, and so we have to go from what I call toddler stage to a little more firmness in its mission to advance public health, healthier people, healthier spaces, healthier Caribbean. We're going to be having an evaluation of the work of CARFA starting, it's just started, and to ensure that we do fulfill the mandate in the intergovernmental agreement to serve the member states of the Caribbean, and to ensure that we promote the development agenda of the Caribbean as well.
CARICOM Secretary General Ambassador Erwin LaRocque says the Caribbean community is closely monitoring the political situation in Guyana. In an invited comment to reporters during the recently concluded CARICOM UN Systems meeting, the CARICOM Secretary General said CARICOM will only intervene if the democratic and judicial processes break down.
There's a process that's ongoing since the vote of no confidence. I've said so before, and we've seen the process has worked thus far, in the sense that the CCJ delivered a judgment and its consequential orders. And the CCJ, in my view, was very, very clear that all the actors concerned, the executive, the opposition, and the GCOM, must play their part. As I understand it, there continues to be dialogue among the parties. We continue to monitor everything very, very, very closely. I have met with both the President and with the Leader of the Opposition on more than one occasion following the ruling. I have met with the Leader of the Opposition following the ruling, and I have spoken to His Excellency following the ruling. So I am in touch. I will continue to be in touch. My chairman is also briefed regularly. That is the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I know he's also reached out. And we're going to continue monitoring this. We remain available to assist if we're asked to assist. But CARICOM does not interfere unless the democratic and the judicial process breaks down. We are very much engaged as far as I'm concerned. I read all kinds of things in the media, but that's our position going forward. It does not mean that we don't care. It doesn't mean that we're not engaged. We are fully engaged. Dialogue is continuing, and we have to allow the dialogue to continue. And if things break down, then obviously then one needs to take a different position on this situation as it is. But for now, I think let the situation continue. I have spoken to both of them. I have made the offer that CARICOM is prepared to assist if both parties deem it necessary. Both parties have to. I can't respond to one, not the other. Both parties. I've made it clear on numerous occasions. That is how we operate.
The critical importance of the oceans and seas to the economic sustainable development of small island developing states was underscored at the 25th session of the International Seabed Authority in Jamaica on Monday the 22nd of July, and at the 3rd CARICOM workshop on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Regional representatives attended a 3-day workshop in Barbados, which ended on the 18th of July, as the Caribbean community coordinates its positions on a new international agreement under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Jamaica Foreign Affairs Minister, Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, on Monday assumed the presidency of the 25th session of the International Seabed Authority. The minister welcomed the increased global focus on ocean-related matters, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 14, which urges stakeholders to collaborate to conserve and use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development.
Capacity in the beekeeping industry is expected to be enhanced through collaboration among the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, Argentina, and 4 CARICOM countries. Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Kitts and Nevis will participate in a regional South-South cooperation project to strengthen the industry in Caribbean countries by increasing the productivity of beehives. The project, titled ApiCaribe, will see Argentine specialists facilitating the installation of Pirone beehives, which are more productive than the Langstroth beehives that are traditionally used in those countries. In a release, ICA said it will coordinate the provision of advisory services by specialists from Argentina, the world's 3rd largest exporter of natural honey. Due to its rich diversity of flora and fauna, the Caribbean region has great potential for apiculture, ICA says.
Efforts are underway to prevent violent extremism as the Caribbean community seeks to maintain its standing as a zone of peace. The CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM IMPACS, and the Commonwealth Secretariat collaborated recently for a Preventing Violent Extremism course in the CARICOM region. The participants discussed key concepts, international agreements, and norms on the subject, as well as the CARICOM IMPACS and the Commonwealth Secretariat Counterterrorism and Preventing Violent Extremism programs.
Interagency cooperation in addressing the vulnerability of the fisheries sector to national disasters is expected to be enhanced with the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, and the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, the CRFM. Executive Director of CDEMA, Ronald Jackson, and the Executive Director of CRFM, Milton Horton, signed the Memorandum of Understanding formalizing collaboration to sustain an early warning system for disaster management in the fisheries sector. The MOU was signed on the sidelines of the CARICOM UN Systems meeting in Georgetown, Guyana on the 23rd and 24th of July.
Our fishers and fishing communities are exposed to significant risk as they operate in the land-water interface in the coastal areas. We have been working over the past few years in developing instruments to improve the livelihoods and the resilience of our fisher folk, including in particular the development of a fisheries early warning system that was developed with the assistance of funding from the IDB through the PADA program for climate resilience. This is a very important instrument for the fisheries sector. But at the end of the program, we need to put in place a system to sustain the operation of this. And this is one of the specific objectives of this particular agreement, to work together, fisheries and CDEMA, to ensure the long-term sustainability of this fisheries early warning system, which would significantly improve communication with our fisher folk.
I will just say ditto, and that we're happy to continue with supporting our member states within the area of the overall early warning systems in the Caribbean.
For these and other stories, visit the CARICOM website at caricom.org or visit the CARICOM news site at today.caricom.org.
Like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.